Series begins with Rick Grimes and his friend Shane. Rick and Shane are both police officers, and you could say they are like brothers. By the way, Rick is married to a woman named Lori, and they have a child named Carl. Once, Rick and Shane were just sitting and chatting together casually. Then they received a report that there was a gang on the run and the police were trying to catch them, and they were supposed to go and arrest them. So they quickly got into their car until they reached the place where the criminal's car was supposed to pass. They threw spikes on the ground to stop the car and waited from a distance until the car came and passed by. Soon after, the car came and ran over the spikes, flipping it. Everyone in the car got out, and a skirmish ensued between them and the police, resulting in everyone in the car dying. Suddenly, one of them emerged and shot Rick with a bullet that almost killed him. At that moment, Shane was worried about him and immediately called for an ambulance and took him to the hospital. Rick went to the hospital, but unfortunately, he fell into a coma. Interestingly, he woke up several times during the coma, and Shane brought him flowers. Unfortunately, Rick passed out again. After a while, Rick finally woke up, completely. Strangely, he found the flowers that Shane had supposedly brought him were dead beside him, which shocked him greatly. He tried to get up and go outside, but because he was very weak from being in a coma for a long time, he fell to the ground. However, he got up again and went out of his room. All the hospital equipment was turned off, and there was no one else in the hospital. Additionally, the hospital was in a state of unnatural chaos. He couldn't understand what was happening, so he walked towards the hospital corridor and found a dead woman with a mutilated body. He was terrified and tried to get away from the place. He saw bullets and blood on the wall and also found a door with "Do Not Open," dead inside written on it, with many hands coming out of the place, creating a strange sight. Naturally, after seeing all this, he was extremely scared and immediately ran out of the hospital. Here was the biggest surprise as soon as he got out. Why was the entire empty space in front of the hospital filled with corpses, and even the bodies were in a torn and difficult state? Rick, after all this, was about to collapse, but he managed to get out of the hospital. He saw that the entire army was destroyed, with nothing left of it, and in front of him were the remnants of the army's equipment. At that moment, Rick wanted to go and check on his son and wife amidst everything that was happening. So he found a bicycle and was about to take it and run, but there was a woman with her lower half missing trying to eat him. Immediately, Rick took the bicycle and rushed to his house. When he got there, he found no one at all in the house. Rick completely thought that his entire family had died, so he started crying and hitting himself, hoping that if this was a dream, he would wake up from it. Unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. Rick left the house and didn't know what to do or where to go, so he sat down beside it. But suddenly, a child came from behind Rick and hit him on the face. Then the child's father came, and when he saw Rick's face and realized he was just a normal human, he took him and brought him into the house. Rick had actually fainted from the blow. After a while, Rick started to regain consciousness. The father, Morgan, treated Rick and even changed his bandage. Morgan introduced himself to Rick and told him that the child who hit him earlier was his son, Dwayne. Morgan apologized to Rick for his son hitting him, but he thought Rick was one of the zombies. Of course, Rick didn't understand anything. So Morgan told him to calm down and come eat and he would explain everything. Rick ended up sitting with Morgan and Dwayne for dinner. Then, they asked him who he was and what was the last thing he remembered. Rick told them he was a police officer and the last thing he remembered was being shot and falling into a coma, from which he had woken up that morning in the hospital. Morgan was shocked and told him a lot had happened while he was in a coma he didn't know about. Morgan explained there had been an epidemic causing people all over the world to turn into zombies, a fever causing their body temperature to become extremely high until they die. And when they die, they come back to life but without a brain, so they become savage and want to kill and eat anyone in sight. Currently, just a small bite from them is enough to turn you into one of them in a very short time. In simple terms, a zombie virus has spread across the world. Of course, for you, this was completely unbelievable. He ate with them, and after they finished eating, he sat aside trying to process everything he had been told. Suddenly, everyone heard the sound of knocking on the door and a strange noise outside the house. At that moment, they went to see who was at the door at night. It turned out to be Morgan's wife, who had died a long time ago and is now a zombie. At that moment, Dwayne kept crying over her, and Morgan began to tell Rick the story of his wife. He told him that his wife's name was Jenny and that she was once bitten, which gave her a fever that made her very hot until she died and turned into one of the zombies. Morgan was supposed to kill her at that time, but he couldn't because he wasn't able to kill someone who was so dear to him in that way. As they finished talking, everyone. The next day, Rick was feeling a bit better than before, so he teamed up with Morgan to go back to his house. After a while, they arrived there, and Rick noticed that all the pictures in the house were taken along with some clothes. He realized that his wife and son must have managed to escape from the house before they died. At that moment, Morgan told him that if they were indeed still alive, they would definitely be in Atlanta because he heard on the radio before it stopped that there was a shelter and a very large community there. Rick heard this and was filled with hope, deciding to head there. But first, he took Morgan and his son to the police station to get some supplies. There they all took a nice hot shower, put on new and clean clothes, and finally, Rick gave them a lot of weapons. He also took some weapons for himself. Then he told them he was going to Atlanta and asked if they wanted to come with him. Unfortunately, Morgan refused, saying he wouldn't leave and would continue living there with his son. Here. So they disabled the sniper for him so he could kill that dead woman without having to face her. That he could then really kill her, and he also gave him the radio to communicate with him. He told him, "Every day at dawn, I'll call you to check on you." The man finished his words, bid farewell to Morgan and Dwayne, and they parted ways. Each went in their own direction. Morgan then returned home and securely locked himself and Dwayne inside. After that, he left his son and went up to the second floor. From the window, he kept trying with the sniper rifle he had to kill his zombie wife, but he still couldn't. As for Rick, he took his friend's advice and headed to Atlanta. While he was on the road, he started announcing over his radio that he was going to Atlanta, and if anyone could hear him, they should respond. And who heard him? Yes, Shane, my friend. At that time, Shane was with a group of people. Among them were Lori and Carl, Lori being Rick's wife and Carl his son. Of course, not everyone knew that it was Rick, and unfortunately they couldn't communicate with him because the signal was weak and the line got cut. Lori talks to Shane, expressing her desire to go and look for any other survivors since, after the end of the world, they have been living here on the hill all alone. But of course, Shane tells her that it's a big risk and completely refuses. So she leaves him and goes to sit in her tent. Shane then goes to calm her down and reassure her. But my friend realized from their conversation that unfortunately, Lori is currently cheating on Rick with Shane, which is obviously a terrible idea. Meanwhile, on the other side, Rick's car ran out of gas, so he got out to get some from a house he had seen on the road nearby. However, he found nothing there but dead people. Fortunately, there was a horse being kept at the house, so he rode it and continued his journey to Atlanta. Of course, he could see with his own eyes that there were no people at all in the streets and the world around him was completely destroyed. After some time, he finally reaches Atlanta, destroyed. But the significant part here is that he suddenly saw a helicopter above him, so he tried to run after it to see where it was going. Unfortunately, he was shocked when he found himself in front of a massive horde of zombies. His horse was terrified and threw him off, causing him to flee in the opposite direction. But unfortunately, there were zombies everywhere, and they all gathered around him. As a result, he dropped his bag of weapons, but he didn't care about it at all. He went to hide under a tank that was nearby. However, the zombies were still reaching for him. By sheer luck, he found the lower hatch of the tank open, so he entered through it and closed it behind him. Inside the tank, he found a zombie as well, but he quickly killed it. Immediately, he climbed up and closed the upper hatch of the tank and remained inside, feeling helpless. And literally outside the tank, there were hundreds of zombies everywhere, all trying to get into the tank to kill him. But suddenly, help arrived for my friend in the form of someone speaking to him through the radio inside the tank, asking if he could hear him. This person told him that his name was Glenn and mentioned that he saw him escaping from the zombies and entering the tank. Consequently, he advised him to try to get out of the tank and meet him at the building 2 streets away from the tank, and he would help him. At that moment, Rick gathered his courage and got out of the tank, running and killing many zombies until he finally met Glenn. Then, Glenn took him, and they went up the building next to them using the stairs. The zombies were below them and everywhere, so they kept climbing quickly. After they were all safe, Glenn took Rick via the rooftop and they went down to the street, but in a better spot. After that, they all went inside again, and there, Rick met Glenn's group. The problem was that one of them, named Andrea, was holding him at gunpoint, blaming him and saying he was the reason for their troubles. Of course, Rick didn't understand anything, so they brought another member of the group named Morales. Morales pointed out the front gate of the building and told him that because he had been shooting a lot in the street, any zombies in the area had gathered from all directions and would soon break through that door and get in. Just as he was about to apologize, they all heard gunfire again, but this time it was coming from the rooftop of the building they were in. So they all quickly went up to the roof, and here, my friend, we get introduced to another member of Glenn's group named Merle Dixon. Merle was shooting at the zombies from a distance, which only attracted more of them. At that moment, another member of Glenn's group named T-Dog got upset with Merle. Merle, with complete audacity, told him to shut up using a racial slur and started hitting him. No one was able to stop Merle because he was strong, so Rick intervened. Rick hit him and then handcuffed him to a metal pipe. After that, everyone calmed down a bit. At that point, they started looking around and realized that zombies were surrounding the building from all sides. During this tense moment, Jackie, another member of their group, spoke up. Jackie mentioned that these buildings are usually constructed over sewer pipes, so they might be able to escape through them. At this time, Rick took everyone and went down to the passage leading to the sewer pipes. They decided that Glenn, should go down to check if the path was clear, because he was the fastest among them. Glenn agreed and took Morales with him. They went down while the rest stayed above. The key point was that Glenn and Morales found that there was indeed a passage they could use to escape, but it was blocked and there were no zombies. They quickly returned to Rick and the others and explained the situation. At that moment, Rick asked them what exactly attracts zombies, and they told him that it's supposed to be loud noises and also the smell. At that time, Rick decided to mimic their smell and find a way to escape from there. So, Rick took everyone and went out, grabbed a zombie that had died in front of the building, and quickly brought it back inside. Then, Rick decided to cut the zombie into pieces, take its blood and guts, and cover himself and Glenn with them. They would then walk among the zombies outside and try to escape from there. Reluctantly, everyone agreed. So they started cutting up the zombie, taking its guts and blood, and covering Rick and Glenn until they were finally ready. But before Rick went out, he gave Doc the key to Merle's handcuffs so he could free him later. Then Rick and Glenn went outside. At that moment, Rick and Glenn were terrified that this plan might not work, but thankfully, the zombies mistook them for zombies like themselves because of their smell. As a result, no one bothered them, and the plan was going perfectly. It started to rain, and as a result, the smell began to wash off them. After that, the zombies started attacking them, so Rick began killing the zombies and quickly ran towards a place with cars. There, they immediately took a truck and escaped from the area. After Rick and Glenn escaped, they calmed down a bit, and then went to another place with a very fast car. They cut its oil line so the alarm would go off. Then Rick had Glenn take the car that was making a loud noise and drive it to attract the zombies to him and draw them away. And Glenn did exactly that, luring the zombies away from the building where the others were. At that moment, Rick took his truck and drove it to the building so everyone could get in. As Rick came with the truck, they descended from the roof to enter. Meanwhile, Merle was begging them not to leave, so T-Dog pitied him and tried to free him. Unfortunately, T-Dog fell, dropping the key into the drain. Consequently, T-Dog left and walked away. But as a precaution, he locked the rooftop door with a padlock to ensure no zombies could get to Merle. Anyway, he quickly went down to Rick and the others, and they all got into the truck and left the area. Of course, they left feeling guilty for leaving Merle handcuffed on the roof. After some time, they finally arrived at the camp where their group was, led by Rick. And here, to their shock, Shane and Lori were also part of Glenn's group. As soon as Rick arrived, he saw Lori and his son Carl. He hugged them, full of joy that he was reunited with them and that they weren't dead. But of course, Shane wasn't too happy because Rick took Lori from him. However, to be fair, Shane was genuinely a bit happy because his friend came back. And by the way, it wasn't just Shane who was happy. Amy, Andrea's sister, was also happy, as well as the Morales family, and also Dale, the old man who doesn't have any family around, but is a sweet guy who loves baseball. After all this joy, everyone sat at night in front of the fire in their tents, and he started talking about the journey he had been through. He preferred to thank Shane for taking care of his family in his absence, then told everyone he woke in the hospital where he had been for a long time and escaped. He mentioned Merle was tied on the roof of the building they were trapped in. At that time, Dale said, Daryl Dixon, Merle's brother, returns tomorrow, and if he didn't find his brother, he'd cause trouble. T-Dog at that time said that he had chained the rooftop door. Therefore, Merle is definitely still there and alive. Everyone thought about the situation and decided to sleep, planning to resolve it the next day. Rick slept with his wife and his son, Carl. But something outside was about to die from anger. The next morning, Rick sat with Lori and kept telling her that he was thinking of going to rescue Merle. Of course, Lori didn't agree, but before she could continue talking, everyone heard the sound of a zombie. So they went to kill it because the zombie was eating a deer. The important thing is that they gathered around it and killed it. After that, Daryl Dixon finally appeared, and he was very upset that the zombie ate his deer because, by the way, it was the deer he was hunting. Anyway, he got over the situation and went inside. At that moment, Rick and Shane stopped him and told him what happened with his brother and that Rick had to tie him up on the rooftop and he might still be there and alive. Daryl got very angry and started to fight with them, but of course Shane and Rick restrained him and calmed him down. Then Rick told him that T-Dog locked the rooftop door before leaving, so there's a good chance his brother is still alive. Rick also told him that he would go with him to the rooftop to free his brother from there, to make up for what happened. When Rick decided, he was upset as he is risking his life, thus the trash is piled up. Rick said it's not just that. There's also a big bag of weapons. I brought with me when traveling, now lying on the road and no one has taken it. I will bring it back when we return to protect ourselves here from zombies. Because unfortunately, he knew that they really needed these weapons, so he agreed. Rick then said goodbye to Lori and calmed her down a bit. Then he said goodbye to his son and took Glenn, T-Dog, and Daryl, and they went to get Merle. At that time, after everyone left, Shane took Carl, and they continued to play together by the lake. So when Lori found Shane with her son, she went to him, took her son from him, and told Shane that she didn't want him to come near her or her son again. You could say, my friend, that Lori is treating Shane this way now for two reasons. The first is that when Rick was in the hospital and the outbreak happened, Shane went to Lori and told her that Rick was dead. That's why she agreed to go with him and escape the city, knowing that her husband was supposedly dead, so there was no reason to wait. The second reason is that now Rick has returned to her. Therefore, she doesn't want Rick to feel that there was anything at all between her and Shane. At that time, Shane got very upset that Laurie was treating him this way after everything he did for her and her son, but he kept quiet. Meanwhile, at the lake, Andrea, her sister Amy, and Jackie, along with a fourth woman named Carol, were working and washing clothes. At that moment, Carol's trashy husband, Ed, started harassing everyone and even hit his poor wife, Carol. As a result, Shane grabbed him and beat him up, taking out all his anger on him, and then left him and walked away. Meanwhile, Rick and his group arrive at the street where the building is located. They park the car to the side and continue on foot. The plan is to get Merle, then retrieve the weapons scattered in the street, and return with the group. Inside the building where Merle is trapped on the roof, they encounter a few zombies and kill them. After clearing the roof, they cut the chain locking the door. Here comes the shock. Daryl doesn't find Merle at all, but instead finds his hand cut off with a saw next to it, realizing that Merle cut his own hand off, his hand, and escaped from there. As a result, he is now very sad about his brother. As for Daryl's alert, he is trying to track his brother's traces to reach him because his brother descended from the rooftop. Consequently, Daryl now takes everyone and follows his brother's blood trail. After a while, they find that the blood traces led them inside an apartment. In this apartment, they find an iron with skin on it, indicating that Morl cauterized his wound. After that, he jumped out of the window here and left. At that time, Daryl wanted to continue tracking his brother, but Rick told him no, that they would go with him. But first, they needed to get the weapon bag. So, everyone sat down and planned how they could retrieve the bag. It was decided that he would go and get it because he is the fastest, and Daryl would protect him with his arrows. And indeed, Daryl and Glenn went out, with Daryl waiting from a distance while Glenn ran among the zombies, darting here and there until he got the bag. As he was returning, a young man passed by Daryl who stopped him to ask about his brother Merle, if he had seen him. But the young man was very scared and ran back to his group. Eventually they came and started attacking Daryl, but thankfully Glenn arrived, and they focused on Glenn. Just as Daryl was about to fight them, a car belonging to their group arrived. They took Glenn in it and fled. Daryl unfortunately couldn't save Glenn, but he managed to capture the young man. At that time, Rick and T-Dog arrived, but it was too late. So they took Daryl, the young man, and also the bag of weapons because Glenn had left it behind. They started interrogating the young man. Initially, he didn't want to reveal where Glenn was or the location of his group, but eventually, Daryl kept intimidating him until he confessed. So they all headed to the location of this group and had T-Dog stand with a sniper securing the area. The leader of the group, named Jeremy, came out. Rick then told Jeremy that they wanted Glenn, whom they had kidnapped. Jeremy replied that they didn't intend to kidnap him, but they wanted the weapons that were left on the street. He said, "Give us the bag of weapons and we'll give you Glenn." After that, Rick left and went inside with his group to the place they were in. Rick, Daryl, and the young man went back and sat with T-Dog and explained everything to him. They all didn't want to risk giving them the weapons, but Rick told them, "I owe Glenn my life, so I'm going, and you don't have to come with me." But Daryl and T-Dog refused to leave Rick and decided to go with him. And indeed, they killed Eric and everyone else, taking the young man and many weapons with them. Then they confronted Jeremy, pointing their weapons at him. Jeremy and his other men also pointed their weapons back at them, and it was literally about to turn into a massacre, until suddenly a kind old lady appeared in the middle and told her grandson, who was one of Jeremy's men, "Come, get me your grandfather's asthma inhaler because he's dying." At that moment, Rick realized that Jeremy and his men were there for another reason, and they seemed like good people. So, he paused for a bit, and went in with the kind old lady to see what this place was exactly. Rick found that the place was actually a large hospital, and he started to see many elderly people being cared for there. On top of all that, because Glenn was being treated well, everyone there was kind. So here, Rick understood that these people were good. Rick confronted Jeremy, and he said, "I came ready to kill every one of you because you didn't tell me from the start about this place." Jeremy explained that they were used to many people coming to try and rob them, but we're here to protect these elderly people whom the government abandoned when the world ended. Our job is simply to protect these elderly people and provide for their needs. At that moment, everyone felt sorry for Rick, so he told them that he would take Glenn with him and give them the boy. In return, he would give them half of the weapons he had because Rick also had a group he needed to protect. Jeremy agreed, and after that, they parted ways. After what happened, Rick and the others went to get the car and search for Merle, but when they got there, the car was gone, and they realized that Merle must have taken it and was now heading back to the camp to get revenge on everyone. Everyone was very alarmed by this idea. They all quickly gathered themselves and rushed back to the camp. The camp was at a standstill, and everyone was sitting and eating normally. Everything was fine, and they were even happy. But suddenly, a zombie came in, as big as a garbage bin, attacked Carol's husband, and finished him off. Then, a zombie got to my mother and kept biting her. From there, the camp was filled with a giant horde of zombies that continued to kill everyone, and a massive chaos erupted in the place. Because now, everyone grabbed their weapons and started fighting the zombies. Thankfully, Rick and the others arrived at that moment, all armed, and within seconds, they finished off all the zombies there. My friend Andrea was about to die of grief at that moment over her sister, whom she was watching die and couldn't help at all. Unfortunately, Amy was dying in front of her sister. The next day, Rick went aside and started talking through the radio with Morgan. Morgan, my friend, is the person he met when he woke up from the coma. It's important that Rick told him he found his family and also informed him of his current location, warning him not to go to Atlanta but to come to him instead. After Rick finished the call and returned to everyone, Andrea was still the same. She was with her sister's body and couldn't accept that she had died. Meanwhile, Daryl and the others were making sure that all the bodies there were dead before burning them. At this time, Amy turned into a zombie because she had died from a bite. As we mentioned, her sister kept crying, and in the end, she finished her off and buried her. During this, it's mentioned that Jim also appeared bitten and was hiding it. Everyone was very scared and wanted to get rid of him, so now Rick, Shane, and everyone else were discussing what to do. Rick suggested that they go to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention because he believed that if there was any place where people were still looking for a cure, it would be there. However, Shane completely disagreed and wanted them to go to the Fort Benning military base because he heard it was still holding out. So, Dale interrupts everyone and is about to finish off Jim to end this conversation, but Rick and Shane stop him and put Jim inside Dale's truck. After that, Shane takes Rick aside into the woods to talk because he wants to tell him a couple of things. Shane kept telling Rick that he needs to think more about his family, so they shouldn't go to the place Rick wants them to. Rick replied, "They are my family, not yours, so of course I will care for them more than you." Naturally, Shane was very upset by this comment, but then everyone heard a sound in the woods, so they split up to see what it was. But the lesson here is that as soon as Rick moved a little away from Shane to raise his weapon, Shane had a strong desire to finish off Rick and go back to Lori again. However, he restrained himself, and then Daryl coincidentally came and saw him, so Shane lowered his weapon. After that, Rick regretted it and everyone returned to the camp. There, Shane told everyone, "All right, we will all go with Rick to the CDC. Maybe we can find a cure there and help everyone." So everyone agreed, and the day passed. The next day, Rick grabs the radio and tries to communicate with Morgan, telling him that they are leaving and heading to the CDC. After that, he turns off the radio and goes back to everyone to get ready to leave. But then, unfortunately, Morales tells them that he will take his family and go look for his relatives, hoping they can stay with them. He bids farewell to Rick, who gives him a weapon. Everyone says their goodbyes, gets into their cars, and goes their separate ways, and Morales disappears. In general, my friend, everyone kept going for a very long time on the road, and the more they traveled, the more Jim suffered, because he couldn't handle the movement of the car. Anyway, after a while, one of the cars broke down, so everyone got out to fix it. During this time, they all noticed that Jim was very unwell. So Ricky went to check on him, and Jim told him that he didn't want to continue and wanted to get out here on the side and let them leave him to turn into a zombie in peace. Of course, Ricky was very much against this idea, but in the end, he reluctantly agreed. So everyone took Jim out of the car, said their goodbyes with sadness, and left him to head to the CDC. Meanwhile, at the CDC, we find a doctor named Jenner. Jenner, my friend, is the last person still at the center, and we currently see him looking at the screens. He's calling out, but no one is responding to him. It's like there's almost no one listening to him. In these messages, Jenner said that he was alone for 60 days and hasn't reached any new findings. He's starting to lose hope. Jenner ended the broadcast and resumed his work. Jenner was experimenting with the last zombie sample he had. Unfortunately, he accidentally spilled a corrosive substance on it, and part of it reacted with his suit, causing him to lose his hand. Unfortunately, an automatic decontamination of the lab was triggered and it exploded with everything in it. As a result, Jenner is now devastated about losing his last sample. At this time, outside the center, we find that Rick, Shane, and everyone else have finally arrived. From the center, my friend, we see a lot of doors and many corpses and, most importantly, sleeping zombies. Quickly and quietly, everyone starts knocking on the center's door. So now Rick and everyone are outside, and for some unclear reason, he didn't want to let them in. But he tries to communicate with them through the cameras, especially since the zombies woke up and got closer to them. Finally, he opened the door, a bitter, for them to enter. Everyone was very shocked when the gate opened, so they quickly went inside and the gate closed again. He then approached them with a large screen and asked them first, "What are you doing here?" They replied, "We are here looking for another chance." He told them that the gate in front of them, once closed, will not open again. So everyone stopped, followed him into the underground shelter. They were amazed by the clean, well-lit place. First, Jenner introduced himself, saying he was alone as others died or left. Then, Jenner tested everyone to ensure they were okay. But in the meantime, he realized that they hadn't eaten for a long time, so Jenner took them to the kitchen and prepared a huge feast for them, something they hadn't had in a long time. As a result, everyone was genuinely delighted except for Shane, who asked the doctor, "So after being the only one here, what have you discovered?" Jenner replied, "Unfortunately, I haven't discovered anything. Naturally, everyone was taken aback by the answer, but they moved past it and finished their meal. Jenner took them and showed them the bathroom so they could take a shower. Indeed, everyone went in and enjoyed a nice hot shower, and of course they were all very happy, except for Shane, who was still upset about Laurie and kept drinking. Anyway, after they finished, everyone started heading to bed, but at that moment, Shane went to Laurie, closed the door behind them, and confessed something important to her. Shane said, "You blame me for telling you that Rick was dead, but the truth is that when the end of the world started happening, I went to Rick in the hospital to save him, but the army had entered the place and was evacuating the patients. So I went to take Rick off the machines and leave, but I was afraid he would die if I removed him from the machines. Then suddenly, there was an explosion in the place, and all of Rick's machines stopped. I couldn't hear his heartbeat because of all the gunfire, so I really thought he was dead. Nevertheless, I closed his room and put a bed in front of it to keep the place protected." Then Shane told her, "I also told you he was dead because if not, you and Carl wouldn't have come with me. I wouldn't have been able to protect you if I told the truth." She didn't believe Shane, so Shane almost attacked her, but she slapped him. Shane then came to his senses and left. The day passed, and the next day everyone woke up and went to eat. When Jenner joined them for the meal, he found that everyone now wanted answers from him and weren't just there to eat and sit. So Jenner took them to the large hall of the place, turned on the screen and told them, "I will now show you a video of a human brain that explains everything." Jenner explained that the human brain consists of signals, and these signals are the memories and the entire life of a person. However, when a human is bitten, a part of the brain starts to deteriorate and the whole brain dies slowly. Eventually, the person dies. The strange thing is that after a short period, which varies from person to person, a small part of the brain responsible for movement and some sensation begins to reactivate. After that, the person turns into a zombie, driven only by instinct and nothing more. But sir, after all this explanation, Jenner tells them that despite everything he has discovered, he does not know what the virus is that causes all this, nor what its cure is. They all asked him, "What? There's no solution to this, and all the other centers have shut down?" He replied that he doesn't know, but everyone knew that France was the last place to hold out and continue research. At this point, the old man interrupted everyone and said, "There was something I didn't understand. Why is there a large countdown timer in the place?" At this moment, Jenner stood up and told them that this place operates on fuel, and once the countdown reaches 0, the fuel will be depleted and the decontamination will begin. Jenner told them that these places were originally designed so that no virus could escape from them. Therefore, if the fuel runs out, this decontamination means that the place will self-destruct with everything in it. At this moment, everyone is very anxious, and Daryl wanted to confront Jenner, but it all continues. They tried to break the door, but they didn't succeed because it was made to withstand missiles. Even if I open the door for you, the doors above the shelter have automatically locked, and I am not authorized to open them at all. Rick sat with him and kept trying to reason with him, telling him that this time he was the one trying to kill them, not the zombies. He asked for a chance to try for themselves, as their chances might be different from his. At that moment, Jenner agreed with him and opened the door for them. Quickly, everyone gathered and started to leave, but before they left, Jenner grabbed Rick and whispered a dangerous secret in his ear. When Rick heard this secret, he was shocked like never before. But in general, he took everyone there and was about to leave. However, Jackie chose not to join, and Andrea too, so they all tried to convince them, but they didn't respond. So Dale told them to go ahead, and he stayed with Andrea, trying to convince her, to persuade her to leave with him and escape from there, or else he would die with her because he loved her, just like his own daughter. At that time, Rick and everyone with him left the shelter, wondering why it was closed, and the glass here was bulletproof. At that moment, Kira pulled out the grenade and said to Rick, "You brought it on the first day you arrived at the camp." So Rick took the grenade and threw it next to the glass. Finally, the glass broke and everyone quickly got out, with Rick leading the way. And thank God Andrea was convinced, and she and Dale came out from inside the center. But as the place was about to explode because the countdown had finished, Jackie and Jenner died with the center. As for Dale and Andrea, thank God nothing happened to them because they hid before the explosion. They just took each other and watched the car, and in complete shock, everyone took each other and left from there. They went to an unknown destination, but surely they won't stop until they find a suitable place to live in at the end of the world. And we'll see that in the next season. Of course, now, my friend, you want to know what the secret the doctor told Rick is, right? He did tell you this secret, my friend, but in the comments below the video because it's a very dangerous secret, by the way. And that's it. See you in the next part. Goodbye.